latest episode of the Hidden Gems podcast. I'm here with a very special guest, Michael from the Fantom Foundation. Michael, how are you today?
Hey mate, I'm going well, thanks. Yeah, hope you're going well as well, and I really appreciate being on the podcast.
Excellent. Excited to have you on the pod. So, Michael, before we actually get into Fantom, let's learn a little bit about yourself. What were you doing before Fantom? How did you get to Fantom and so on?
I went to university in Australia, so I'm originally from Sydney, Australia. Before Fantom, I sort of discovered Ethereum back in 2015/early 2016 because there were a few people in the computer science department that were basically going around and evangelizing Ethereum, right? And telling everybody have you heard of this thing called Ethereum? Or, it's a bit different from Bitcoin. You can do smart contracts. And they were kind of forward thinking because some of the applications that we have now that have grown enormously, decentralized finance and NFTs and stuff, they were also talking about it back then and saying, this is the future or part of the future. It's a really big opportunity. Ethereum has just gotten released. A friend of a friend went to us one day and was evangelizing Ethereum, told us all a bit about it. And that's when me and a few other friends really got interested. We're like, oh wow, it kind of makes sense to me, what he's saying. And so we started experimenting with smart contracts and learning about how the underlying technology works and learning more about these smart contracts and reading up a lot about Ethereum. And then that kind of led me to one of my final year software projects that you have to do in order to get your degree. There happened to be a professor who's now working for us called Professor Bernard Schultz. And he has a background in what we call programming languages. So what it is about making programs run faster, checking security properties of code to make sure that it executes properly. And so he wanted to take all this expertise and knowledge that he had developed over the past couple of decades or so, and then apply it to smart contracts, because he also had looked into Ethereum and believed that he could apply a lot of his research and knowledge to the area. And so I worked with him and a few other individuals in sort of a research group. And we built software that would basically allow you to automatically find certain patterns in smart contracts. And so the sort of patterns that we'd look for were patterns that would map to exploits that were known at the time, such as reentrancy. And so we created a very early smart contract, a bug finding tool, so to speak. To be honest, it's kind of primitive back in the day, 2016, 17. It was fairly accurate, but it had some false positives. We were, I think, kind of a bit early in that space. At the same time that I was doing that, I also set up one of the first digital asset funds in Australia. I met up with a few people from traditional finance, what's known as the Australian New Zealand Bank, ANZ Bank. And we started a fund together in end of 2017, about 2018. And that's when we also were incubating a number of projects. So one of them was Fantom. And then later on, I decided to join full-time with Fantom with Andre's encouragement. So Andre was very early involved in the Fantom project and had these ideas about building out all sorts of distributed ledger ideas and stuff into basically the Fantom technology that we have today.
Very cool. So early to a lot of emerging waves. I would say, you're quite the OG when it comes to these technologies from a adoption and evangelism. So let's talk about Fantom. So Fantom, I think, has been around for a couple of years. Let's hear what is Fantom? What makes it special? Where are you seeing traction? What is Fantom today?
Yeah, so Fantom is a so-called layer one chain. And what that means is that we run our own distributed ledger, or in colloquial terms, a blockchain, right? And so we have our own distributed ledger technology. And then on top of that, we have what's known as the smart contract execution engine. The way that you would write and compile and deploy smart contracts on Ethereum pretty much works the same way as on Fantom, right? So as a developer on Ethereum, you can take your skills that as a smart contract developer and the applications you built there, and you can essentially redeploy it on Fantom, right? So this is what we call an EVM compatible chain, or Ethereum virtual machine compatible chain. But the key difference between us and the other layer ones, or to say Ethereum, is the way that the consensus works. We process transactions by executing them what we call asynchronously. And what that means is that you can process multiple blocks simultaneously, right? As opposed to Ethereum, where you can only process one block at a time. Intuitively, if you can process, say, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 blocks simultaneously, it's going to be faster than if you just process them sequentially, right? And what this essentially leads to is much better performance outcomes and much faster what we call time to finality, right? Because you're not waiting for current blocks to be confirmed into the network. you can submit a transaction network and very quickly it will already be included into the block, which will then be propagated to the network in order for it to achieve consensus. However, we are also working on other aspects of the technology stack right now. So initially, we just worked on the distributed ledger. As I mentioned before, Andre had a lot of ideas. We worked through those ideas. We put it together to create, the distributed ledger that we have right now. We're iterating, improving upon it. But also, my old professor, Bernard Scholz, he built a team together to really tackle a lot of the programming languages issues to do with the performance of smart contracts. So, for example, he's worked on building what we call like a new virtual machine and a new storage system. And it's all like different mechanisms or being able to store data, do operations on data, and basically do a lot of like smart contract execution, but do it in a much more efficient manner. So we're now working up from the stack. So initially we started just at the bottom, our own distributed ledger. And now we're building out our own middleware layer that would definitely still be compatible with the way that you would write a smart contract, say on Ethereum. So we definitely want to maintain compatibility with, the Solidity programming language, but under the hood, the execution environment might be very different. And that's because the EVM and what Ethereum have done is amazing. They created a lot of this technology from scratch. They were the pioneers, but we also can identify that, they did some like things that maybe not as efficient, that if we redo the architecture, we can make it a lot more efficient to gain performance benefits. And so we took a lot of like the research and the work that Ethereum has done and made a lot of modifications to it and come up with our own ideas. Okay, how do we still execute a smart contract, but do it in a much more efficient manner?
Super interesting. So most other projects, what they've done is they've outsourced the execution to a roll-up or something, and then they do the settlements on the base layer on the L1 chain, and that's how they increase the throughput. And so is that part of your scaling technology, or you guys fundamentally believe that the underlying base layer itself with the parallel execution, it's like a pseudo sharding kind of technology, or are you going to adopt both? Like, what is the story for Fantom going forward?
Yeah, so what we want to do at Fantom is we really think that there is a significant opportunity to scale up the base chain, right? And not just scale up the layer one, but scale up the technologies that sit on top of the layer one as well. Like as I talked about the smart contract execution engine or the FEM and the storage system. The reason why is because based on our research, there are a lot of areas of improvement that could be done like for Fantom, right? There's areas of improvement to the consensus, there's areas of improvement to the virtual machine, there's areas of improvement to APIs and reducing the amount of storage for nodes. We fundamentally believe that there's a lot of optimization that can be done. Now, ultimately, there will be a limit, right? Because there is a blockchain trilemma, and it's not really possible to solve the blockchain trilemma with the knowledge that we currently have. But what you want to do is that you want to optimize the trade-off. You don't want to trade off security for performance. You want to maintain at least like the same level of security that you have now, while also being able to increase performance, right? And I think that is something that makes us really stand out to the other like layer ones or the layer twos that are out there. As you mentioned with these roll-ups, that's usually the behavior of the layer twos, right? The problem with there is that you're kind of sacrificing security for performance, right? Because what you're doing is that you're processing transactions on a smaller number of nodes and then wrapping up all those transactions and then replaying them onto the main chain, right? And the problem there is that clearly the reason why you get better performance on the layer two is because you just have fewer computers validating transactions. So yes, you get a lot better performance, but you're trading security for performance. And this is a sort of similar architecture to what's going on with application chains that a few other L1s are talking about. So they're saying, the way that you scale up is that you just create multiple application chains and, there can be an infinite number of them, right? And that is true. But the problem with those application chains, though, is that, again, you're trading security for performance, right? Someone has to build their own application chain. They have to maintain it. They have to get the validators for it. At the same time, they have to build the application, and they also have to get users for the application. We believe it's a big cost for a developer to have to build their own application specific chain simply to get the chain scalable enough for them to be able to run the application. And so what we do for Fantom, you don't have to worry about building your own application specific chain. You don't have to worry about getting your own validators. You don't have to worry about running your own kind of like sub or mini blockchain. All you have to do is, take the skills that you have for developing smart contracts like on Ethereum, deploying it on Fantom, and then you get all the benefits to the underlying consensus, right? So when we push out benefits to virtual machines, storage, new consensus improvements that are rolling out, you as a developer automatically get those benefits. You don't have to do anything on your end, right? And as a developer, all you need to worry about is building your application and getting users for the application And as we make the network more and more scalable, your application will be able to handle more and more users over time. So that really is what differentiates us, I think, from the other technologies that are out there at this point in time. But eventually, I think we have to explore ideas about sharding and being able to gamify, I guess, like how consensus works, because there is a limit that you can reach in terms of the blockchain trilemma, where you have to start being a bit more clever.
Just for people who are not familiar with the blockchain trilemma, that's basically the balance you have to draw between decentralization, security, and just the throughput or the performance of the blockchain. So you're trading better, faster, cheaper, pick 2 out of 3. And so as you make it faster and faster, you're either scaling down on the centralization or the security. And I guess one aspect here is that the faster Fantom becomes as a chain, the security is intact because it's the base layer chain, but perhaps the decentralization takes a step back because these nodes are becoming heavier. And this is where all of the other innovation with making it lighter, faster, cheaper to process these transactions reduces the requirements, the heavy node requirements. Am I getting that more or less correct?
Yeah. So in the end, it's about optimizing the trade-offs, as I like to say. So, I'm not going to, tell something that's false and say like, oh, we saw the blockchain trilemma, infinite scalability right now. I think we can scale the network tremendously, optimizing the trade-offs, but there is a limit, and we want to see like what limit that potentially is in the future, because we don't exactly know at this point in time.
There's one particular point that I want to bring up, which is very interesting. So maybe almost a year ago, Andre wrote a blog post about how you guys were like weeks away from running out of money at the foundation, at the brink of bankruptcy, and then just like a phoenix rose from those ashes, and now you have decades of runway and very strong financial position, and you can fund the development of Fantom going forward.
Yeah, there's been a lot of ups and downs with Fantom. There's obviously been a lot of ups and downs in the market. There's been a lot of ups and downs internally and externally in relation to Fantom. So the article that you mentioned, I mean, right now we have between like $100, $200 million in like non-like FTM assets, right? What happened was that Fantom did its ICO back in June 2018, right? And that was like towards the tail end of what we call like the quote unquote ICO boom, right? And so Fantom raised a bunch of money. I think it was a bit over $40 million, $41 million. And we raised it primarily in like ETH and some Bitcoin and some fiat currencies, right? But then the market immediately started to go down. And then, we had the bear market, quote unquote, in 2018, and in 2019, it recovered a bit, but it's still kind of a bear market. And because of like a variety of things that happened, including like, the value of our crypto assets going down, and the fact that, maybe the treasury work wasn't that great back then, we were down to, I think, approximately maybe like $5 to $6 million by the beginning of 2020. And then, of course, like March 2020 hit, right? And so we were kind of like, struggling. We were having to cut back. We were having to have hard conversations, and we were kind of thinking like, how are we going to survive, right? But fortunately, there were some things that Andre did that were absolutely like right and really, really helped save us. And there was also a bit of luck involved. So in the beginning of 2020 was the beginning of DeFi, right? And, Andre was like one of the like early pioneers of DeFi. He was one of the few individuals that helped start it off. It began with this project called iEarn, which later became Yearn. But what Andre did is that, he took some of the money that we had at Fantom and he started putting in DeFi, right? And the early DeFi returns, particularly like in 2020, were really, really good, right? Because it was just the beginning. So, he was basically like helping to compound like our reserves in various different protocols. But the protocol that we made most of our money from in the early days was the Curve protocol, right? So, we knew like, he knows like Mitch like very well. He saw that the Curve protocol was like very legitimate and an early project in the DeFi space. And so what he did was he put a lot of foundation funds into the Curve protocol and was basically just farming Curve, right? And then by August 2020, the Curve did an announcement that the early participants in the Curve project were going to get some like vested rewards over like a period of a year, and it'll be unlocked every block. And those Curve rewards ended up being substantial for Fantom. Like we thought that it would just be, quote unquote, just be like a few million, right? And it turned out to be, I think, tens of millions of dollars, right? And so those Curve rewards were really, really good for us because we were able to restake some of them and earn further rewards. We were able to sell some of them off into stable coins and then recompound their stable coins. And so basically like what Andre did was that Andre took advantage of DeFi very early on for Fantom. And he also like took advantage of better market conditions that started to emerge in 2020 and of course 2021, which sort of like really helped save Fantom financially. And now we're in a much more stable financial position. We were able to accelerate development. We've hired, several new individuals beginning of this year. And a lot of that has to come down, really to like Andre's contribution to the Fantom project, which has been enormous. A lot of people don't realize that that Andre was really with Fantom from the very beginning, right? From the very early days. And he was the one that laid the foundation for the technology that we have today. He's the one that helped onboard the developers that we have today. And I also helped participate in that. And he was also the one that got Fantom really early involved in DeFi and really helped build out the treasury management. And we also got a bit lucky, with the market conditions and how the Curve protocol rewards worked out in the end.
What an incredible story. So just going through this journey, all the scar tissue you've picked up, there's no way you're going to stop now. I don't think you're going to. You've almost earned the spot.
It's my only job.
Yeah, exactly. Now let's get into some of the technical bits here. So Fantom has this gas sharing program. Perhaps, for our listeners, outline what that program is and what is the status of that program today.
Yes, so we call this the Gas Monetization Project, or the Gas M project for short. And what it is taking the idea from YouTube, right? So YouTube has a monetization program where the more viewers you get, the more kind of money that you make, and of course YouTube makes money from that as well. And so we took kind of the YouTube monetization model and recharacterized it or worked it into how smart contracts behave on chain, right? And the reason we did that is because we fundamentally believe that the real sustainable value for a blockchain is really being able to generate high levels of transaction fees on a daily basis, right? Because it's very similar to transaction fee-based companies that exist out there like Visa and MasterCard, et cetera. Except in this case, you don't just use blockchain technology just for simple payments, right? You can use blockchain technology for a wide range of use cases like we talked about before, DeFi, NFTs, and maybe P2P insurance and other things. And so what you want to do is you want to encourage as many transactions on the network as possible, right? And so with the gas monetization program, what we said to developers is, hey, if you deploy in Fantom and you accumulate a minimum of 125,000 transactions for your smart contract or your group of smart contracts, and this number may change over time, then you will get a share of the transaction fees that are generated for your smart contract. And so what we hope to do is that we hope to incentivize developers to build popular applications on Fantom, because they're incentivized because they get rewarded for some of the transaction fees, as well as for how their own application works. Users are happy because they're using applications that are really popular, and the validators are happy because they're earning transaction fees for more of the volume that's generated. And so I think as a whole, kind of everyone wins in terms of who are the quote unquote stakeholders of the Fantom ecosystem. And so the gas monetization project has just rolled out. I think the past couple of months, we've had several projects that are now part of the monetization project. So what they do is that they register their smart contracts with the gas monetization project, and then they can just go to an interface whenever they want, and the rewards accrue per block. And then they can just claim, rewards or claim a share of the transaction fees for their smart contract. And so I think early on, we've had a lot of good traction. We've had a lot of great feedback. We've had some great publicity about it as well. And we really want to see how it works out for the next, 6 months or a year from now, and really see how we can modify it to maybe encourage as much user growth as possible. So that's the gas monetization project. I think it's quite unique to Fantom, and I encourage anyone to just Google Fantom gas monetization and you'll see articles on it. And if you want more knowledge about it, feel free to reach out myself or the team, and we'll definitely share more details about it. But that's essentially how it works.
Right. I think this program is also brilliant in another way, because it solves the monetization question for these smart contracts. Because today, if you have a fee extraction or a rent module in your smart contract, then typically what's happening is that you're opening it up to someone else coming out and removing that fee and just redeploying it, right? So that's typically what happens. And so here, that's not really an option. This is 100% values aligned. It's not rent extraction by any means. It's purely based on utility and usage and actual, active usage of the protocol. So really smart program. The next question I have is about your native account abstraction that you guys are rolling out. Let's hear a little bit about, what the plans are around that and what is it. And
account abstraction is the idea that you don't really distinguish between smart contracts and what are known as EOAs, or externally owned accounts, right? Or like say in plain language is like, individual wallets that are not smart contracts. So Ethereum as well as Fantom distinguishes between the two currently, right? The idea about account abstraction is that you don't really distinguish between the two anymore, right? And that has like potentially like a lot of benefits, right? Because it simplifies like the architecture. You don't have to really worry about if like you're sending funds to a smart contract and it will get stuck, or sending it to an individually owned wallet, etc. To be honest, in terms of like account abstraction for Fantom, it's an idea that we have, but it's not like the highest priority that we have right now. So we had ideas about, for example, like gas monetization, and of course, like developments to do with the underlying chain, and also to do with the virtual machine and storage system. And I know Ethereum has their own idea about account abstraction we're also looking into. So to be honest, we haven't thought about it heaps much. There isn't currently development going on about it, but it is an idea that I think over the next couple of years is something that we would probably want to implement, because there are a lot of benefits to it, and it just makes, like, I think the user experience for individuals just probably a lot better.
another question, it's more of a personal question and almost like a self-serving question. How has your experience been working with Covalent and the Covalent team?
It's been really great. I mean, you guys have always been like friendly and transparent from the early days. Your services just seem to work quite fine. We've had feedback from a number of projects on the Fantom community that say, Covalent works well. We get a lot of data from it. The APIs are all fine. And honestly, I haven't really like heard any complaints about you guys. And certainly us at the foundation, we don't have any complaints about you guys as well. You're always in constant communication with us on Slack. And we appreciate all the opportunities, like with the podcasting and just in general, like working together. So you guys have been really a great partner, and it's been pretty smooth. Like I don't know what else to say.
Awesome stuff. Okay.
But like when you look at the stats for like Covalent, I think we're one of the biggest chains on there. There's a lot of queries and hundreds of millions, probably beyond that go through like Covalent on a monthly or yearly basis. So you guys are definitely like very, very popular in for applications on the Fantom network.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of big projects. Pretty much all the major dexes use Covalent today on Fantom.
That's fine.
On that note, how did you guys come up with this almost like a memeified brand value of having Spooky Swap and Spirit Swap and everything as an extension of like Fantom and Casper and so on? Like how did that start?
It was really just from the community. We weren't the ones that like came up with the ideas about like, having a spooky theme and all that. I think what happened is that, Fantom, FANTOM is not spelled, with a PH, but obviously like when you say it, it kind of has like maybe like a spooky tone to it, right? Because when you look at like the foundation website or our wallets or any of the material that we put out, right? There really isn't like any like spooky theme or any sort of like architecture or wording that would kind of like indicate that. So what really happened was that in like early 2021, this is when like the first two major projects deployed on Fantom, right? And that was Spooky Swap and Spirit Swap. And these are dexes that fork technology from like Ethereum and deployed on Fantom and really made like a great user experience out of it. And I remember like sitting in the office when we had one back in Sydney, and we're just turning to one another. And we're like, have you heard of these guys called like Spooky? Have you heard of these guys called like Spirit Swap? And we're like, no, who are they? And we looked into them, and obviously the first thought is like, oh, yeah, are these guys real and stuff, or are they trying to scam people and all that? And so we did like a whole bunch of investigations, and we found out no, like they actually seem legit. No, the code seems fine, etc. And then we said to ourselves, oh, why these guys like have pictures of ghosts and spirits and all that sort of stuff? And then we quickly realized that it's because of the name Fantom, and we're just like, okay, so I wonder if like people are going to continue with the spooky theme. And that's pretty much what happened. The other applications that took on the spooky theme, and then on Twitter, of course, there's like the little ghost icon and all that. Some people have said to me before, isn't this sort of like spooky theme really a turnoff for other people out there? Because when they look at this and be like, this is just a kid's playground. It's all like Halloween. It's all like kind of like just like weird internet people, and I don't really want to get involved in the chain that has a spooky theme. But in my opinion, one, I don't think we can change the spooky theme outcome, right? And second of all, it was from the ground up, it was from the community, right? And I think that's what's like amazing, right? Is that it wasn't the foundation that said, okay, we're going to have this sort of persona about Fantom, and from the top down. It was really from the ground up. And if people want to take on the spooky theme, or people don't want to take on the spooky theme, that's really up to them. There are a lot of applications of Fantom that have absolutely no spooky themes whatsoever, right? They all just look like normal, very clean, minimalist design, which is great. And there are some other applications out there like Spooky Swap that have like a spooky theme, right? So it's really up to them. And yeah, I think I find it kind of amusing that I'm talking about this and saying the word spooky a lot.
Yeah, it's great to see. Like that's emergent behavior. There's no way, while you're writing the white paper, is like, people may have a wordplay here and pick up on this ghost theme, but it's really cool.
We didn't really expect it, to be honest. Yeah, we were kind of surprised.
Michael, any final parting thoughts for our listeners?
Thanks again, for listening to this and watching the podcast, and thanks again for having me on. If you want to find out more about Fantom, please follow us on Twitter. That's @FantomFDN. So @FantomFDN. Usually, when we do announcements or we talk about what's happening on chain, we will usually post there first. It seems to get the most reach. We've almost got 500,000 followers. So please help us get to the 500,000 mark. Go to our website. So that's Fantom.Foundation. So there you'll find out more information about the chain, about some of the popular applications on Fantom, some of the team members from the foundation, as well as links to like other socials and other material. And feel free to contact us there, or to reach out to us on our Telegram, on our Discord, etc.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure having you share the stories from the early days and some of the ongoing innovations that Fantom is bringing to the market. Take care. Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. See ya.